Ever felt invisible in your own family, like you could disappear and no one would even notice? Well, that's been my reality for 27 years. I'm Erica, and I'm sitting here in my shoebox studio apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, staring at a stack of unpaid bills and wondering how I became the ghost daughter in my own family story. This place is barely 300 square feet. The kitchen is so small I can touch both walls with my arms stretched out. The radiator sounds like a freight train and the bathroom door doesn't lock. But it's mine. It's the first thing I've ever owned that nobody else could take credit for. See, growing up, I learned early that love in the Morrison household came with conditions. My sister Tara, she's 24 now. She figured out the code before I did. Be charming. Be the one who lights up the room. Be the one who makes mom and dad smile just by walking through the door. Me, I was the responsible one. The one who did her homework without being asked. The one who cleaned up after family dinners, while Tara regaled everyone with stories about her day. I was the one who remembered to water mom's plants, who made sure dad took his blood pressure medication, who kept track of everyone's schedules. But here's the thing about being responsible. It's invisible. Nobody applauds you for doing what you're supposed to do. Nobody throws a party because you paid your bills on time or showed up when you said you would. Responsibility is expected, not celebrated. Tara, though, she was magic. Still is, I guess. She could walk into a room and suddenly everyone's day got brighter. She had this laugh that made you want to laugh too, even if you didn't know what was funny. She could tell a story about waiting in line at the grocery store and somehow make it sound like the most fascinating adventure you'd ever heard. Mom and Dad, Helen and Mark, they orbited around Tara like she was the sun. When she was 8 and I was 11, she decided she wanted to be an artist. Dad immediately cleared out the spare bedroom and turned it into her art studio. He bought her easels and paints and these fancy brushes that cost more than my school clothes. Me, I asked for a desk for my room so I could do homework properly instead of hunching over my bed. I got a TV tray from Goodwill and a lecture about being grateful for what I had. When Tara was 10, she went through a phase where she wanted to be a singer. Mom drove her to voice lessons 40 minutes away twice a week for 6 months. She bought her a keyboard and enrolled her in the church choir. That same year, I made honor roll 3 semesters in a row. I remember bringing home my report card, all A's, and showing it to Dad. He glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds and said, "Good job, kiddo. Hey, did you see Tara's watercolor? She's really got an eye for color." I kept that report card in my backpack for weeks, hoping maybe he'd ask to see it again. He never did. But the worst part wasn't the missed opportunities or the overlooked achievements. The worst part was watching my parents' faces when Tara walked into a room versus when I did. With Tara, their whole expressions would change. Their shoulders would relax, their voices would warm up, their eyes would get this soft, proud look. With me, it was different. Not cold exactly, but practical. Like I was a piece of furniture that happened to be functional, useful, but not particularly noteworthy. My best friend Maya saw it too. She's been my anchor since we were 7 years old, and she's the only person who's ever called out my family's behavior to my face. Maya's got this way of cutting through nonsense that I've always envied. She says what I'm thinking, but could never say out loud. I remember when I turned 9, Maya came over for my birthday party, except there wasn't really a party. Mom had forgotten completely. She'd been so focused on helping Tara prepare for her school talent show that my birthday just slipped her mind. When Maya arrived and saw there were no decorations, no cake, no presents, she looked at me with this expression I'll never forget. It was like she was seeing something terrible for the first time. She was 9 too, but in that moment she looked older than me. "Where's your birthday stuff?" she asked. I made up some excuse about how we were celebrating later, but Maya wasn't buying it. She marched into the kitchen where Mom was frosting not 1 but 2 cakes for Tara's talent show. 2 cakes for a school show on my birthday. "Mrs. Morrison," Maya said in that fearless way kids have, "it's Erica's birthday." Mom looked up from her frosting like she'd just remembered I existed. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I got so caught up with Tara's show. We'll do something special this weekend, I promise. But Maya wasn't done. You made Tara 2 cakes, but you forgot Erica's birthday. The silence in that kitchen was deafening. Mom's face went red. Dad cleared his throat, and Tara looked between all of us like she couldn't understand what the problem was. It's fine, I said quickly, because even at 9, I knew my job was to make things easier for everyone else. We can celebrate later. But Maya looked at me like I'd just given up something precious. Later, when we were alone in my room, she said something that I think about almost every day, even now. Erica, she said, sitting on my bed with her arms crossed, you know, this isn't normal, right? Parents aren't supposed to forget their kids' birthdays. I wanted to defend them. I wanted to explain that Mom was just stressed that Dad was working long hours, that Tara's talent show was important too. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. They love me, I finally said. They love me differently. Maya shook her head. Love isn't supposed to make you feel invisible. That was the moment I knew my love had conditions. That was the moment I understood that in my family, love was earned, not given. And for some reason, I could never quite figure out how to earn enough of it. But here's what I didn't know then, sitting in my childhood bedroom with my best friend, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. That moment wasn't just about understanding my place in my family. It was about planting a seed that would take 18 years to grow. A seed that would eventually teach me that love without conditions isn't something you beg for. It's something you demand. And if the people who are supposed to love you can't give it to you freely, then maybe it's time to stop trying to earn it. But I wasn't going to let this pattern define my adult life. I couldn't. Because at 27, living in this tiny apartment with my stack of bills and my invisible existence, I was about to discover that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to be seen and start making yourself impossible to ignore. Fast forward 18 years and you'd think things would be different, right? That maybe I'd learned to stand up for myself to demand the recognition I deserved. Well, if you thought that you'd be wrong, because I'd actually gotten better at being invisible. I'd turned it into an art form. By 27, I had what most people would call a decent life. I worked in public relations for a mid-sized firm in downtown Cleveland. Nothing glamorous but steady. I wrote press releases, managed social media accounts, and occasionally got to work on campaigns that actually mattered. The pay was modest, about $42,000 a year, but it was mine. Every penny I earned came from my own work, my own ideas, my own late nights at the office. I lived in that shoebox apartment I mentioned, and yeah, it was tiny, but I'd made it home. I had a fold-out couch that doubled as my bed, a card table that served as my dining room and office, and exactly 4 plates because that's all that fit in my miniature cupboard. I shopped at discount grocery stores, bought generic brands, and had gotten really good at making one chicken last for 5 meals. And I was dating Jonah. God, Jonah. He's this gentle, brilliant software developer who somehow sees me in a way my own family never has. He's got these kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and he listens when I talk. Actually, listens, not just waits for his turn to speak. When I told him about my promotion to senior account coordinator, he took me out to dinner to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just this little Italian place near his apartment. But he was genuinely proud of me. That feeling was so foreign, I almost didn't know what to do with it. But here's where the story gets complicated. About 6 months into our relationship, Dad hurt his back at work. He's a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant, and he lifted something wrong and herniated 2 discs. Suddenly, he couldn't work for 3 months, and Mom's part-time job at the local library wasn't enough to cover their mortgage and bills. They were in trouble. Real trouble. The kind where you're looking at losing your house trouble. So I did what I'd always done. I quietly stepped in to fix it. I started sending them $1,000 every month. $1,000 out of my take-home pay of about $2,800. That left me with $1,800 for rent, utilities, food, transportation, and everything else. It meant I was eating ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches most days. It meant I couldn't afford to replace my winter coat when the zipper broke, so I safety pinned it shut. It meant turning my heat down so low I could see my breath in my apartment some mornings. But it also meant my parents could keep their house. It meant Dad could focus on healing instead of panicking about money. It meant I was finally doing something that mattered. I set up an automatic transfer from my checking account to theirs. First Friday of every month like clockwork. $1,000. I didn't tell them it was from me. I just started sending it. And here's where it gets really twisted. Within 2 weeks, my parents had convinced themselves the money was coming from Tara. Tara, who was 24, and had been living rent-free in their basement since graduating college 2 years earlier. Tara, who had never held a steady job but was finding herself through her art. Tara, who spent her days painting watercolors and her evenings posting them on Instagram with captions about living authentically. But somehow, in my parents' minds, Tara was the one taking care of them. I found out during a phone call with Mom about 3 weeks after I'd started sending the money. "We're doing so much better financially," she said, her voice lighter than it had been in months. "Tara has been such a blessing. We always knew she had a big heart, but to sacrifice like this for us, she's really grown into such a mature, caring young woman." I sat in my cold apartment, eating 79-cent mac and cheese, listening to my mother praise my sister for my sacrifice. And I said nothing. I told myself it was noble, that it didn't matter who got the credit as long as my parents were okay, that maybe this was how I could finally contribute something meaningful to my family without making it about me. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I knew I was perpetuating the same pattern that had defined my entire life. Tara gets the glory, I do the work. The calls from my parents started coming more frequently after that. They'd gush about how responsible Tara had become, how she was really stepping up as an adult. Dad would get emotional talking about how proud he was of her for putting family first. Meanwhile, Tara was posting Instagram stories from coffee shops and art galleries talking about her latest creative inspiration. She was taking weekend trips to Chicago and Columbus, buying new clothes, treating her friends to dinner, all while living completely free in my parents' house, eating their food using their electricity, and somehow getting credit for paying their bills. The cognitive dissonance was staggering, but what was more staggering was that I was allowing it to happen. Jonah started noticing things before I was ready to admit them to myself. We'd be having dinner, and I'd mention something about my family, and he'd get this expression on his face. Not judgmental exactly, but concerned. "Babe," he said one evening as we split a $10 pizza in my apartment, "why do your parents hang on Tara's every word but barely react when you tell them about your promotion?" I just told him about calling my parents to share the news about my promotion to senior account coordinator. Dad had said, "That's nice, honey," and immediately changed the subject to ask if I'd seen Tara's latest painting. The promotion came with a $3,000 raise, but somehow my father was more interested in discussing my sister's abstract interpretation of autumn leaves. "They're just excited about her art," I said, but even as the words came out, they sounded hollow. "When's the last time they asked you about your work, your goals, your life?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't remember. Every conversation with my parents started with them updating me on Tara's latest project or achievement and ended with them thanking me for being so understanding and supportive of my sister's journey. "They love us both," I said finally. "They just express it differently." Jonah set down his slice of pizza and looked at me with those kind eyes. "Erica, love isn't supposed to make you feel like you're invisible." Maya had said almost the exact same thing to me 18 years earlier. Apparently, I was a slow learner. But the truth was starting to creep in whether I wanted it to or not. Every month, I'd send that $1,000 and watch my bank account dwindle to almost nothing. Every month, I'd listen to my parents praise Tara for her generosity and maturity. And every month, I'd tell myself that this was just how families worked. Someone had to be the helper, the supporter, the one who sacrificed. Maybe invisibility wasn't a bug in my family dynamic. Maybe it was a feature. Maybe this was just my role. I started having conversations with myself during my commute to work. Sitting on the bus, watching Cleveland blur past the windows, I'd wonder what would happen if I just stopped. Stopped sending them money. Stopped being the reliable one. Stopped making everything easier for everyone else at my own expense. What would happen if I stopped being invisible? The thought scared me more than I wanted to admit. Because being invisible while painful was also safe. If nobody expected anything from me, I couldn't disappoint them. If nobody saw me, they couldn't judge me. If nobody knew what I was sacrificing, they couldn't tell me I was doing it wrong. But as I sat in my freezing apartment, eating discount food and wearing the same 3 sweaters on rotation, because I couldn't afford anything else, I started to wonder if safe was really worth it. I started to wonder if maybe it was time to stop hiding in the shadows and see what would happen if I stepped into the light. The question was whether I had the courage to find out. The answer to that question came sooner than I expected. 3 months after I'd started seriously questioning my place in this family dynamic, Tara's 25th birthday rolled around, and my parents decided to throw her a party. Not just any party, a celebration. I got the invitation via text message. Tara's 25th birthday bash, Saturday, 3 p.m. backyard BBQ. Come celebrate our amazing daughter. Our amazing daughter, not their daughters plural. Their daughter, singular. But I was used to that by now, right? I told myself I was used to it. The party was everything you'd expect from people who thought their daughter was generously supporting them with $5,000 a month. Yes, you heard that right. Somewhere along the line, the story had grown. In my parents' minds, Tara wasn't just sending them $1,000. She was sending $5,000. I have no idea where they got that number. Maybe they wanted to believe she was sacrificing even more than she actually was. Maybe they needed the story to be bigger to match their pride. Or maybe they were just so desperate to have something to brag about that the truth wasn't enough anymore. Either way, when I pulled up to my childhood home that Saturday afternoon, the backyard was transformed. There were string lights everywhere, rented tables with actual tablecloths, a catered spread that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 2 months. There had to be 40 or 50 people there. Neighbors, family friends, cousins I hadn't seen in years, co-workers from mom's library job. And the gifts. Jesus, the gifts. There was an entire table dedicated to presents, and they weren't small token gifts. I could see wrapped boxes that were clearly expensive, electronics jewelry boxes, what looked like art supplies that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. I parked my beat-up Honda Civic behind a row of much nicer cars and sat there for a minute, looking down at my contribution to the celebration. A $12 picture frame from Target and $48 in cash. My last $60 until my next paycheck in 4 days. I'd spent 20 minutes at Target debating whether to get the $12 frame or the $8 one. The $12 one was slightly prettier, had a better weight to it. But that was $4 I could have spent on food. In the end, I chose the nicer frame because it was my sister's 25th birthday, and even though she was getting credit for my sacrifices, she was still my sister. The $48 was literally every bill in my wallet. I'd planned to buy groceries on my way home, but I figured I could make it to payday on whatever was left in my pantry. Some rice, a can of soup, maybe some crackers. Maya was already there when I walked into the backyard. She spotted me immediately and came over, and I could tell by her expression that she was already annoyed. "This is insane," she whispered, nodding toward the gift table. "Did you see the jewelry box? That's at least $200. "It's her birthday," I said automatically. "Erica," Maya grabbed my arm gently. "Your sister hasn't worked in 2 years. Where exactly do people think she's getting the money for all this generosity she's supposedly showing your parents?" It was a good question. A question I'd been avoiding asking myself. The party was in full swing and Tara was absolutely glowing. She moved through the crowd like she was hosting a movie premiere, gracious and charming and effusive in her thanks. She hugged everyone, remembered details about their lives, made each person feel like they were the most important guests there. Watching her, I understood again why everyone loved her. She had this gift for making people feel seen, feel valued. It was ironic, really, considering how invisible she'd made me feel my entire life, but I don't think she did it on purpose. I think she just naturally drew light toward herself, and some of us happened to be standing in her shadow. Mom and Dad were absolutely beaming. They introduced Tara to guests like she was visiting royalty. "This is our daughter Tara the artist. She's been such a blessing to us lately." They'd lower their voices conspiratorially. "She's been helping us out financially while Mark recovers from his injury. Such a mature, caring girl." I stood near the fence, holding my modest gift bag, watching my parents' faces as they talked about my sister's generosity. The generosity that was actually mine. The maturity that was actually my sacrifice. The caring that was actually me going hungry so they could keep their house. When it came time for gifts, Dad appointed himself the master of ceremonies. He had Tara sit in this decorated chair while everyone gathered around, and he started reading the cards and announcing the gifts like he was hosting a game show. "From Aunt Linda, a beautiful jewelry box." He held it up for everyone to see. Applause. "From the Johnsons, a gift certificate to that fancy art supply store downtown." More applause. "From Cousin Mike and Sarah, a weekend getaway to Cedar Point." The crowd oohed and awed. I was standing in the back waiting my turn when Dad picked up my gift bag. It looked so small and pathetic compared to everything else on the table. The Target bag was wrinkled because I'd reused it from something else I'd bought months ago. Dad opened the card first. I'd kept it simple. "Happy 25th birthday, Tara. Hope this year brings you everything you deserve. Love, Erica." But when Dad looked inside the card and saw the $48, his expression changed. He held up the bills and looked at them like they were contaminated. $60, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. His voice had this tone I'd never heard before. Mocking, disappointed. "Only $60. That's it." The backyard went quiet. Not completely silent, but that kind of awkward hush when everyone knows something uncomfortable is happening, but nobody wants to acknowledge it. I felt my face burn with shame. 40 people watching as my father held up my last $60 like it was an insult. "Dad," I started to say, but he wasn't done. "You know," he said, his voice getting louder, "your sister has been sending us $5,000 a month to help with the bills while I've been recovering. $5,000 every month without us even asking. And you show up with $60. The silence was complete now. Everyone was staring. I could see Maya's face furious on my behalf. I could see Tara looking uncomfortable for the first time all day. I could see neighbors and family friends exchanging glances, not sure where to look. But most of all, I could see my parents. Mom was nodding along with Dad's speech, her face full of pride, as she looked at Tara. Dad was still holding my money like it was evidence of my selfishness. "Such a generous, mature young woman," Mom added, smiling at Tara. "Always putting family first. We're so proud of the woman you've become." And that's when something inside me broke. 27 years of being overlooked. 27 years of having my contributions ignored, minimized, or credited to someone else. 6 months of literally going hungry so my parents could keep their house while my sister got praised for generosity she'd never shown. "I'm the one who's been sending the money," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the silence of that backyard, everyone heard it. Dad looked at me with confusion. "What?" I said, "I'm the one who's been sending you money. $1,000 a month for the last 6 months. "Not Tara, me?" Dad laughed, actually laughed. "Erica, come on. Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not being ridiculous. I set up an automatic transfer from my checking account to yours. First Friday of every month. Bank of America to Huntington Bank. Account ending in 4738. I watched Dad's face change as I recited the last 4 digits of their account number. the account number I'd memorized from sending them money every month. But instead of apologizing, instead of acknowledging what I just told him, he got defensive. Well, even if that's true, he said, Tara's been contributing in other ways. She's been emotionally supportive. She's been helping around the house. She's been living in your basement rent-free for 2 years, I said, my voice getting stronger. She's been eating your food, using your utilities, getting her laundry done for free, while I've been eating ramen noodles and wearing the same 3 sweaters because I can't afford anything else. The crowd was getting more uncomfortable by the minute, but I couldn't stop. 27 years of silence was coming out all at once. I've gone hungry to support you, I said, looking directly at my parents. I live in a studio apartment so small I can touch both walls at the same time. I haven't bought new clothes in 8 months. I safety pinned my winter coat shut because I couldn't afford to fix the zipper. I've been sitting in that apartment with the heat turned down so low I can see my breath because every extra dollar I have goes to you. Mom was shaking her head like I was making it all up. Erica, you're being dramatic. Dramatic. I felt something wild and desperate rising in my chest. I've been sacrificing everything to keep you afloat, and she gets the credit. She gets the praise. She gets celebrated for being generous and mature, while I get lectured about bringing a $60 gift with my last $60. Tara finally spoke up. Erica, I never asked for credit, but you took it, didn't you? I turned to look at her. You let them think you were supporting them. You let them praise you for my sacrifice. You sat there while they talked about how generous and mature you were, knowing it was all a lie. The backyard was completely silent now, except for my voice. 40 people watching a family implode in real time. You want to know why I only brought $60? I looked back at Dad, who was still holding my money. Because that's all I have. That's literally every dollar in my wallet. I was planning to buy groceries on my way home, but I thought my sister's birthday was more important than me eating this week. I could see Maya trying to catch my eye, probably wanting to calm me down, but I was past the point of calm. Past the point of, I love this family, I said, my voice breaking now. I've loved you and supported you and sacrificed for you my entire life. And all I've ever wanted was for you to see me, to acknowledge that I matter, to recognize that I exist. Dad opened his mouth to say something, but I held up my hand. But standing here watching you mock my gift while praising Tara for money she never sent, I finally understand something. You don't want to see me. You want me to be invisible. Because invisible daughters don't ask for recognition. They just give and give and give without expecting anything back. I took the gift bag out of Dad's hands, the picture frame, and the $48 that represented everything I had left. Well, congratulations, I said. You've got your wish. Consider me invisible. And I walked out. Through the crowd of stunned relatives and neighbors, past the catered food and expensive gifts, past my parents calling my name, past Maya trying to follow me. I got in my Honda Civic and drove away from my childhood home, and I knew something fundamental had just changed, not just in my relationship with my family, but in my relationship with myself. That night, sitting in my tiny apartment with my $48 and my Target picture frame, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being invisible, and I was done paying for the privilege. The first thing I did when I got home from that birthday party was open my laptop and log into my bank account. The automatic transfer was scheduled to go out in 3 days. First Friday of the month, like clockwork. $1,000 from my checking account to theirs. I stared at that scheduled transfer for probably 10 minutes, my cursor hovering over the cancel button. 27 years of conditioning telling me I was being selfish, that family comes first, that good daughters sacrifice for their parents. But then I thought about Dad holding up my $48 like it was an insult. I thought about the room full of people watching him mock my gift while praising Tara for money she'd never sent. I thought about 6 months of eating ramen noodles and sitting in a freezing apartment while my sister got credit for my sacrifice. And I clicked cancel. Just like that. 27 years of being invisible, and it took one click to start changing everything. You know what's funny? The first week after I canceled that transfer was the best week I'd had in months. And I'm not talking about emotionally, though, that was true too. I'm talking about practically. For the first time in 6 months, I got to keep my entire paycheck. Do you know what it feels like to have an extra $1,000 when you've been surviving on 1,800? It feels like freedom. I went grocery shopping that weekend and I didn't buy generic everything. I bought name brand cereal, I bought fresh vegetables instead of frozen, I bought actual meat instead of whatever marked down protein was about to expire. I stood in that grocery store checkout line with a cart full of real food, and I almost cried. I bought new shoes. My work shoes had holes in the soles that I'd been covering with duct tape for months. I bought a real pair of professional shoes that didn't leak when it rained. $49 at DSW, and they were the most beautiful shoes I'd ever owned. I turned my heat up. Not all the way up because I'm not completely reckless, but enough that I couldn't see my breath in my apartment anymore. Enough that I could wear one sweater instead of three. I ate breakfast every day that week. Real breakfast, not just coffee and whatever crackers I had left over. I bought eggs and bread and actually started my days with food in my stomach. It was amazing how much better I felt, how much clearer my thinking was when I wasn't constantly worried about money, how much more energy I had when I was actually eating enough food. But the best part was the silence from my parents. For one whole week, my phone didn't ring with guilt trips or updates about Tara's latest project or reminders about family obligations. For 1 week, I got to exist without managing their emotions or their finances. It was the most peaceful week I'd had in years. And then Friday came, the first Friday of the month, the day the transfer was supposed to happen. My phone started ringing at 11:30 a.m. "Erica, honey, I think something's wrong with the bank." Mom's voice was confused, maybe a little worried. "The money didn't come through today. I called Huntington and they said there's no pending transfer. Maybe there's a technical problem." I let it go to voicemail. She called again an hour later. Then Dad called, then Mom again. By the end of the day, I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails, all variations of the same theme. Something was wrong with the bank. The transfer must be delayed. Maybe Tara was having technical difficulties. Tara. They still thought the money was coming from Tara. But apparently, someone was starting to figure it out. Saturday morning, I woke up to a voicemail that had come in at 2:47 a.m. Tara's voice shaky and quiet. "Erica, it's me. I think Mom and Dad are starting to ask questions about the money. They called me tonight, asking if I was having problems with my bank account, and I didn't know what to say. I've never sent them money. I've never sent anyone money. I don't even have money to send. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I should have said something before, but I didn't know how, and I liked that they were proud of me. But it wasn't me. It was never me. I know that. And now I don't know what to do." The voicemail was 3 minutes long. 3 minutes of my sister rambling and apologizing and basically confessing to 6 months of taking credit for my sacrifice. But at least she was finally being honest. The reckoning came on Sunday. Dad called at 8 a.m. Not Mom this time. Dad. And his voice was different than I'd heard it in years. Serious. Almost formal. "Erica, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay," I said, though I was pretty sure I knew what was coming. "Did that money come from your account?" Such a simple question. Such a complicated answer. "Yes," I said. Silence. Long, heavy silence. The whole time, yes. More silence. "But why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell us it was you?" And there it was, the question I'd been dreading and anticipating for 6 months. Why didn't I speak up? Why did I let them think it was Tara? I could have given him the easy answer. I could have said I wanted to help anonymously, that I didn't need credit, that I was just being humble. But I was done with easy answers. I was done protecting everyone else's feelings at the expense of my own truth. Because I knew you wouldn't believe it, I said. And you didn't. What do you mean? Dad, I told you at Tara's party that I was the one sending money. I told you in front of 40 people. And you laughed at me. You called me ridiculous. You accused me of being jealous. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, but he didn't say anything. I've been invisible in this family my entire life, I continued. Every achievement I've had, every sacrifice I've made, every time I've tried to help, or contribute, or just exist, it gets overlooked, or minimized, or credited to someone else. So, when you automatically assumed the money was coming from Tara, even though she's never had a job or shown any sign of financial responsibility in her entire adult life, I wasn't surprised. I was just tired. Erica, he started, but I wasn't done. Do you know what it's like to go hungry, so your parents can keep their house and then listen to them praise your sister for your sacrifice? Do you know what it's like to live in poverty while your family thinks you're selfish because you can only afford a $60 birthday gift? You should have told us. I did tell you. You didn't want to hear it. Another long silence, and then Dad's voice changed again, got harder. Well, regardless of all that, we need that money, Erica. I'm still not cleared to go back to work full-time, and we can't make the mortgage payment without it. I don't care about the credit or the recognition or whatever this is about. We need you to resume the payments. And there it was. Not an apology. Not acknowledgement of how they'd treated me. Not even basic gratitude for 6 months of sacrifice. Just a demand for more money. No, I said. What? I said no. Erica, you can't just stop helping us because your feelings got hurt. This is family. Family helps family. You're right, I said. Family does help family, but family also sees family. Family acknowledges family. Family doesn't mock their daughter's gift and then demand she resume paying their bills. You're being manipulative, Dad said, his voice getting angry now. You're holding money over our heads to get attention. Manipulative. That's what he called it when I finally stood up for myself. That's what happens when invisible people become visible. They get called manipulative. I'm not holding anything over your heads, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I'm just not paying for the privilege of being ignored anymore. So what, you're just going to let us lose the house? Dad, you have 2 adult daughters. You've been telling everyone that one of them has been generously supporting you for months. If that's true, then you should be fine. If it's not true, then maybe it's time to figure out a different solution. Erica, I'm asking you to reconsider. I'm done being the ghost who pays your bills, I said. I'm done being invisible. I'm done sacrificing everything for people who can't even see me. Fine, Dad said, and his voice was cold now. Fine, but don't expect us to come crawling back when you realize how selfish you're being. He hung up. I sat in my apartment holding my phone, feeling something I'd never felt before after a conversation with my parents. Relief. Not guilt, not regret, not the familiar ache of not being enough. Just relief. For the first time in my life, I'd drawn a line. I'd said no. I'd chosen myself. And you know what? It felt amazing, but I also knew this was just the beginning. Because now, without my money keeping them afloat, my family was going to have to face some uncomfortable truths. They were going to have to figure out what they really valued and who was actually willing to step up when the chips were down. Without my money, let's see what Tara really brings to the table. The silence after that phone call with Dad lasted exactly 12 days. 12 days of peace. 12 days of eating real food, wearing warm clothes, and sleeping soundly without the constant anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck while supporting 2 households. But I should have known it was too good to last. The financial reality hit my parents faster than I expected. Without that $1,000 a month, they were short on everything. The second month, their electricity got shut off. The third month, they missed their mortgage payment. And suddenly, Tara's artistic journey became a lot less important than keeping the lights on. Maya called me with updates because apparently my parents were telling everyone in town about their financial struggles, including the part about how their selfish daughter had abandoned them in their time of need. Your mom told Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store that you're punishing them for some imaginary slight, Maya said during one of our weekly coffee dates. She said you're holding money hostage because you're jealous of Tara's success. Success. Tara's success. I almost laughed, but it hurt too much. What they're not telling people, Maya continued, is that Tara finally had to get a job. That got my attention. Really? Yeah. Your dad basically gave her an ultimatum. $800 a month or find somewhere else to live. She got hired at some design firm downtown. Apparently, she's miserable. $800, not even the full 1,000 I'd been sending, but close. I wondered if they'd done the math and realized that was probably the maximum they could squeeze out of someone working an entry-level job while still living at home. I felt a tiny twinge of satisfaction followed immediately by guilt for feeling satisfied, but only a tiny bit of guilt. Not enough to change my mind. The phone call started in week 3. First, it was Grandma Morrison, Dad's mom. She called on a Tuesday evening, and I could tell she'd been crying. "Erica, sweetheart, I don't understand what's happening with your family." Her voice was shaky, confused. "Your father says you've stopped helping them with their bills. He says you're angry about something." I loved my grandmother. She was one of the few people in my family who had ever really seen me, who remembered my achievements and asked about my life. But she was also 83 years old and got most of her information from Dad. "Grandma, it's complicated." "But honey, they're struggling so much. Your mother called me crying because they might lose the house." What happened to the sweet girl who always helped everyone? What happened to the Erica who would give someone the shirt off her back? That sweet girl was tired, I wanted to say. That sweet girl had been giving away so much of herself that there was nothing left. That sweet girl finally realized that giving someone the shirt off your back doesn't mean much if they don't even notice you're cold. But you don't say that to your 83-year-old grandmother who's been told you're being selfish. "I'm still that person, Grandma. I'm just learning to help myself, too." But family comes first, sweetheart. Family always comes first. After I hung up with Grandma, the text messages started. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions about my choices. Family friends who had watched me grow up were disappointed in my selfishness. Everyone had heard one version of the story, and in that version, I was the villain. "Really disappointed in you right now, Cousin Jennifer. Your parents sacrificed everything for you girls, and this is how you repay them. Family friend, Carol. You're being petty, and you know it. Uncle Tom. Can't believe you'd abandon family over money. Cousin Mike." The messages kept coming. Each one a little stab of doubt, a little voice saying, maybe I was wrong, maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should just go back to being invisible, because at least then, everyone was happy. Except me. But apparently, my happiness wasn't part of the equation. Jonah found me crying over my phone one evening, scrolling through another batch of accusatory texts. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting down next to me on my couch. I showed him the messages, all of them. He read each one carefully, his expression getting more serious with every swipe. "Erica," he said finally, "you know these people don't have the full story right." "But what if they're right? What if I am being selfish?" "Look at me." He took my hands. "You supported your parents for 6 months while living in poverty. You went hungry so they could keep their house. You sacrificed your health, your comfort, your financial security. And when they mocked your gift and refused to acknowledge your sacrifice, you finally stood up for yourself. That's not selfish. That's not punishment. That's holding people accountable for how they treat you. But they might lose their house. Erica, that's not your responsibility. You're their daughter, not their retirement plan. They have 2 adult children. They need to figure out a solution that doesn't depend on one daughter sacrificing everything, while the other daughter gets praised for doing nothing." He was right. I knew he was right. But 27 years of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Tara. She showed up at my apartment on a Thursday evening looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, she had bags under her eyes, and she was wearing what looked like actual work clothes instead of her usual artistic flowing fabrics. "Can I come in?" she asked, and her voice was different. Tired. Defeated. I let her in, and she sat on my couch like she was afraid it might collapse under her. "I hate my job," she said without preamble. "Okay," I said, not sure where this was going. "I hate getting up at 7 a.m. I hate sitting at a desk all day. I hate having a boss who tells me what to do. I hate creating designs for other people's visions instead of my own. I hate having to account for every minute of my time. I hate the office politics and the deadlines and the way my feet hurt at the end of the day." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "But mostly, I hate that I'm finally understanding what you've been doing for years while I got to play artist in mom and dad's basement." I sat down across from her, not sure what to say. $800 a month, she continued. "That's what I have to give them now. $800 out of my $1,200 take-home pay. That leaves me with $400 for everything else. Gas, food, clothes, any kind of life outside of work and home. Do you know what I bought for lunch yesterday? A packet of crackers from the vending machine. Because that's all I could afford." She was crying now, and I felt something strange. Not satisfaction exactly, but a kind of sad recognition. "I thought being the favorite was a compliment," she said. "I thought it meant they loved me more. But it wasn't a compliment, was it? It was a trap. They didn't expect anything from me because they never thought I was capable of anything. They praised me for the smallest gestures because they never believed I could do anything substantial." I handed her a tissue and sat back down. "And you," she looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You've been capable your whole life. You've been responsible and reliable and self-sufficient, and instead of celebrating that they just expected it, they took it for granted. Tara, no, let me finish. I've been thinking about this for weeks ever since I had to get this job. All those times they bragged about my emotional maturity and artistic sensitivity, what they were really saying was that I was too fragile for real responsibility, too special for ordinary expectations." She wiped her nose and looked around my tiny apartment. "But you've been living independently, supporting yourself, quietly sending them money you couldn't afford, and instead of recognizing that strength, they just assumed you could handle anything. They made you invisible because seeing you would mean acknowledging their own failure." It was the most insightful thing I'd ever heard Tara say. And probably the most honest. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry I took credit for your sacrifice. I'm sorry I let them praise me for your work. I'm sorry I was so caught up in being loved that I didn't notice you were disappearing." We sat in silence for a while, two sisters finally seeing each other clearly for the first time in our lives. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "Dad's talking about taking a part-time job even though his back isn't healed. Mom's looking for additional work. They're scared, Erica, really scared." I felt a familiar tug of guilt, the old programming trying to kick in. "Fix it," it whispered. "You can fix this. Just go back to sending money and everything will be fine." But Jonah's voice was louder. "You're not responsible for fixing everything." "Are they talking about me?" I asked. Tara nodded. "Mom cries a lot. She says she doesn't understand what happened to her relationship with you. Dad's angry, but I think he's starting to realize things. They're not saying it out loud yet, but I think they're beginning to understand that they've been taking you for granted." 2 weeks later, my phone rang at 9 p.m. on a Sunday. Mom's number. I almost didn't answer. I'd been ignoring most of their calls for over a month. But something made me pick up. "Erica." Mom's voice was small, uncertain. "Hi, Mom. Can we really talk not about money or bills or any of that? Just, can we talk?" I looked around my warm apartment at my full refrigerator, at the new shoes by the door. at the life I was finally able to live when I wasn't sacrificing everything for people who couldn't see me. Yes, I said. We can talk. That conversation with Mom lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of things that should have been said years ago. Truths that had been buried under decades of family dynamics and unspoken expectations. She cried. I cried. And for the first time in my adult life, my mother really listened to me. I want to understand, she said. I want to understand how we got here, how we made you feel so invisible that you had to disappear completely for us to see you. So I told her. I told her about the birthday she forgot when I was 9, about the report cards that got ignored while Tara's finger paintings went on the refrigerator, about working 2 jobs in college while Tara got an allowance for her art supplies, about 6 months of eating ramen noodles while they praised my sister for my sacrifice. We did that, Mom said quietly. We really did that to you. 2 weeks later, she called again. This time it was an invitation. Would you come to dinner? Just family. Just us four. I think it's time we had a real conversation. I almost said no. Part of me was enjoying the peace of not having to manage their emotions or expectations. But another part of me, the part that had been hoping for this moment for 27 years, said yes. The dinner was awkward in a way our family gatherings had never been before. Usually, Tara filled any silence with stories and laughter, and my parents hung on her every word. But this time, everyone seemed to be waiting for someone else to speak first. We were halfway through Mom's pot roast when Dad finally broke the silence. We owe you an apology, he said, looking directly at me. Not at his plate, not at the wall behind me. At me. We owe you a big apology. I set down my fork and waited. I've been thinking about what you said at Tara's party, he continued, about being invisible, about us not seeing you. And you were right. We made you invisible because it was easier than acknowledging what you were doing for us. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. We failed to see you, she said. We failed to see your sacrifices, your achievements, your needs. We took you for granted because you never demanded attention the way... She glanced at Tara. We thought love meant not having expectations, but what we were really doing was ignoring you. Tara had been quiet through most of dinner, but now she looked up from her plate. Can I say something? We all turned to her. I need to tell you guys something that I should have said months ago. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking slightly. I never sent you any money. Not $1. Not ever. Mom and Dad both stared at her. All those months you were telling people how generous and mature I was, how I was supporting you while Dad recovered. I was living in your basement, eating your food, not contributing anything. And I knew it. I knew you thought that I was sending money, and I let you think it because I liked being the hero. The silence in that dining room was deafening. Erica was the one sending money. Erica was the one sacrificing. Erica was the one eating ramen noodles and wearing broken shoes so you could keep your house. And instead of acknowledging that, you mocked her gift and told her she was being jealous. Dad's face went red. Mom looked like she might be sick. I was a coward, Tara continued. I was so used to being praised for doing nothing that I couldn't admit the truth. I let my sister go hungry while I took credit for keeping you fed, and I'm ashamed of that. I'm deeply, deeply ashamed. The healing didn't happen overnight. It took months of difficult conversations, of new boundaries, of learning how to be a family that actually saw each other. But the real turning point came in July. Dad was feeling better back to work part-time, and they decided to throw their annual 4th of July barbecue. The same backyard where I'd been humiliated 3 months earlier. I wasn't sure I wanted to go. The last time I'd been at one of their parties, I'd left in tears after being publicly shamed. But Maya convinced me it might be important. Give them a chance to do it right this time, she said, so I went. And this time when Dad stood up to address the crowd, the speech was very different. I want to take a moment to recognize someone very special, he said, his voice carrying across the yard. Most of you know that Helen and I have been through a tough time this year with my injury and the financial strain that followed. What you might not know is that we had help. Quiet, generous help that kept us afloat. I felt my cheeks burning as 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My daughter, Erica, Dad continued, has been supporting us for months. Not just financially, though. She's done that too. She's been the stable, reliable, selfless daughter who stepped up when we needed help most. And instead of acknowledging that we took her for granted, we made her invisible. The crowd was silent listening. I want everyone here to know that Erica has been sending us money for months while living in a tiny apartment and sacrificing her own comfort. She's worked extra hours gone without things she needed and never once asked for recognition or praise. She just quietly took care of us because that's who she is. I started crying. Not from shame this time, but from something I'd never felt before at a family gathering. Pride, recognition, the feeling of being seen. We failed her for a long time, Dad said, but we're not going to fail her anymore. The applause was genuine this time, warm. Several people came up to me afterward to tell me how proud they were of me, how much they admired my character, how they'd always known I was special. It was everything I'd wanted for 27 years. But the most important changes were the practical ones. When I resumed helping my parents financially, it was on my terms. $2,000 a month maximum with clear boundaries about how it could be used. Tara continued working and contributing equally. No more one daughter carrying the entire burden while the other got praised for existing. I kept my own apartment. I kept my own life. I kept my voice. And when family dynamics started slipping back into old patterns, I spoke up immediately. No more quiet suffering. No more invisible sacrifices. No more accepting scraps of recognition while someone else got the feast. 6 months after that July 4th barbecue, I was having coffee with Tara at a cafe near her work. She looked tired, but more solid somehow. More real. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked. Being the favorite? She considered the question seriously. I miss the feeling of being special, but I don't miss being helpless. I don't miss having no real skills or confidence, or sense of my own worth outside of their approval. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Being the favorite was like being kept in a pretty cage. It felt nice until I realized I couldn't survive outside of it. You've always been free, even when they couldn't see it. You've always been strong. I didn't feel strong, but you were. Strength isn't about being seen. Strength is about surviving, even when you're invisible. I thought about that for a long time after our conversation. About strength and visibility and the difference between the two. I'm 30 now. I still live in Cleveland, though I've upgraded to a one-bedroom apartment with actual heat and a full-sized refrigerator. I still work in PR, though I got promoted to account director last year. I'm still dating Jonah, though we're talking about moving in together and maybe eventually getting married. And I'm no longer invisible. Not to my family, not to my friends, and most importantly, not to myself. I learned something important through this whole experience. I learned that love without recognition isn't really love at all. It's exploitation with good intentions. I learned that family dynamics that require one person to disappear so others can shine aren't worth preserving. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable the people who refuse to see you. I'm no longer invisible, and I'll never sacrifice my voice to be accepted again. If you're listening to this, and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're the one who always gives while others take credit, if you're the reliable one who gets overlooked while the dramatic one gets praised, I want you to know something. Your worth isn't determined by how much you can sacrifice without complaint. Your value isn't measured by how invisible you can make yourself for other people's comfort. You don't have to disappear to prove your love. If your worth is only seen when you disappear, maybe it's time to show up loudly. Set your boundaries. Tell your story. Demand recognition for your contributions. Stop making yourself small so other people can feel big. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to take up space in your own life. And if the people who claim to love you can't handle you being visible, then maybe it's time to find people who can. Trust me on this one. The view is much better when you're no longer invisible. What do you think about Erica's choice? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about family drama and finding your voice, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.